My name is Oscar, and I've been madly in love with Leanna since I was 19. I met her at college and was instantly smitten by her beautiful smile and her dazzling personality. She had this amazing aura about her. When she was around then, however bad my day had been, everything just felt good. I didn't tell Leanna how I felt about her because she had a boyfriend, Tony, who also just so happened to be my housemate. Leanna loved Tony, and he loved her, so I kept my feelings to myself. I knew that I'd have to make do with having Leanna in my life just as a friend. I finished college, started a new job, and things were going pretty well. I was still in love with Leanna, but I'd learned to accept the fact that she was happy with Tony, and I was pleased for them both. Then one day I got a frantic call from Leanna saying that she'd been driving and they'd been in an accident. Tony was dead. The accident hadn't been Leanna's fault. The roads had been icy and the car had skidded into a brick wall. Leanna found it difficult to get past the guilt. She wasn't this full-of-life person anymore. Instead, she just seemed so lost and sad. I started spending more time with her. I took her out to restaurants, the bowling alley, and mini-golf. These were the types of things we all used to go with Tony, but I wanted her to realize that she could still live her life and enjoy it even though Tony wasn't here anymore. When Leanna was around at my house and we were watching Tony's favorite film together, she was crying, and I was trying my best to comfort her. I just wanted to take all the pain away from her. Before I could stop myself, I blurted out the words, "Leanna, I love you." She looked stunned. I'd said them now and I knew it was too late to take them back. "I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have told you that. You're grieving for Tony and, well, I know you see me as a friend, but I truly love you, Leanna, and always have. I want you to realize that the accident wasn't your fault and find happiness in life, as you're a beautiful person inside and out, and Tony would want you to live an amazing and happy-filled life because he loved you." She burst into tears and hugged me. We both stayed like that, huddled on the couch, crying for hours. Finally, she pulled apart from me. She told me that I was an amazing person, but it was all too much for her, and she needed space. "How about if we're both still single at 30, then we'll get married?" she asked me. At first, I didn't think that she was being serious, but I loved her so much, and I believed that agreeing to this would comfort her. So there it was. If by 30 Leanna had learned to heal, and neither of us had fallen in love with someone else, then we'd get married. After this, we parted ways. Leanna moved to another town, and I moved countries. For the first couple of years, we didn't talk at all. Then out of the blue, Leanna sent me a message on social media. We started chatting more regularly, and then we became strong friends again. Talking to Leanna resurfaced all of the feelings I felt for her, and my love for her grew stronger than ever. When we were both age 29, we were chatting on the phone, and I jokingly mentioned the marriage pact. She suddenly fell silent, and at first, I was worried I'd upset her. Still, I knew that I needed to tell her how I felt. "Leanna, I still feel the same way about you. I don't love anyone else. I love you." More silence. I thought, I'd done it this time, but I didn't regret telling her how I felt. "I haven't fallen in love with anyone else either," she eventually said. "Let's spend some time together and see if the spark's still there." I wanted to shout yes, but I tried to keep my cool. At this point, we were both living in the same city, so we arranged to meet up at the weekend. The spark was most definitely still there. We started dating, and it was amazing. I finally had the girl of my dreams, and I'd never been happier. A few months later, we were walking through the park after a romantic meal, and I got down on one knee and proposed to her. She smiled at me and said, "Not fair. I'm not 30 yet. You'll have to put that away for 2 more months. Then ask me again then." I thought it was silly, but it was reasons like that that made me love her even more. She always honored her word. I planned a surprise 30th birthday for her in her favorite restaurant. I invited all of her friends and family, and I planned on proposing to her. I was waiting for her in the restaurant. Her friend was meant to bring her, but they were late. I rang her friend up and asked her where they were. Her friend started crying and told me that Leanna had been crossing the road and a car had hit her. She was at the hospital. Leanna was in intensive care. I left the party without saying a word to anyone and raced to the hospital. Leanna was in a coma for 2 days. I stayed there and held her hand for the entire time. There was nothing left they could do for her, and she died. I'd finally got my soulmate, and now I'd lost her. I fell into a state of depression and lost my job, my home, everything. I moved back in with my parents and had to start again. I'm currently in therapy to try and rebuild my life. It's not easy, as most of the time, all I feel is empty. It's been 4 years since then, and I still miss her every day. It's hard, but I've learned to live with the pain and loss of the life we'll never lead. Thank you for listening to my story. Some love journeys are never meant to be, and as painful as this is, we have to find the strength and will inside of ourselves not to give up on life. I'm trying my best to be strong and to live out my life as well as I possibly can, as I know that this is what Leanna would have wanted.
Hi, my name's Jethro, and even though this is a love story, it almost ended in complete disaster. Let me tell you my Valentine's Day last year. You see, my girlfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. I live in San Fran, and she lives in New York. Not ideal, right? Well, there's nothing we could do about it. After college, we both landed our dream jobs, but on opposite sides of the country. And neither of us were willing to give up on these fantastic opportunities. But we also weren't willing to give up on our relationship. And we made it work. For the first few months, everything was great. Once a week, we had a Skype date, and we'd even dress up. I always wore a shirt and put gel in my hair, and we'd always cook the same meal, so it felt like we were eating together. Of course, her cooking was definitely better than mine, and I might have ordered takeaway a few times, but she doesn't need to know that. Sometimes it was hard, though. But as they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I was falling more and more in love with her every day. And anyway, after 3 years, my company promised to move me to New York, so we wouldn't be apart forever. And we held on to that thought. It's what got us through all those lonely nights. But there was still one problem. Trust. Yep, that tricky old thing. My job was so demanding, so I often missed her calls. And then when I'd reply, she'd already be in bed and wouldn't message me back until the next day. The time difference killed me, even though it was only a few hours. One night she said she couldn't make our Skype date because of a work event. And then later that night she was tagged in a photo on Facebook with some guy. He had his arm around her, and I freaked out. I called her until she woke up and asked her who he was. I felt so jealous. And suddenly I realized how hard it was to trust her. She said it was just her colleague and that she'd call in the morning. Then she just hung up. I lay awake that whole night feeling sick, thinking she was definitely about to break up with me. In the morning, she called me straight away and apologized and said her colleague was gay and that I had nothing to worry about. I felt so stupid and eventually calmed down and apologized to her too. Valentine's Day was coming up and I suddenly had an idea. I'd fly to New York to surprise her. She'd be so happy. Valentine's Day finally came around, and I told her I had a busy day of meetings and that my phone would be off. And then I hopped on the plane and flew to New York. I arrived around 6 p.m., and it had just gotten dark. The taxi dropped me right outside her house, and I glanced at the window, afraid she'd see me. I'd bought the biggest bouquet of roses and couldn't wait to see her face. But then I spotted something. There was the shadow of 2 people in her lounge. I quickly checked I had the right address. And this was definitely it. Suddenly, the shadows started kissing, and absolute dread filled my body. I knew she lived alone, so this had to be that guy from the photo. She'd lied to me. I knew it. How could she? I thought about banging on the door or throwing a stone at the window and then confronting her. But I was too hurt to even speak to her. Instead, I went to the nearby corner store and bought some spray paint. When I came back, the lights were off, and I thought they must have gone up to the bedroom. The thought made me sick to my stomach. So across her front door, I spray painted a few nasty words. I wanted everyone to see that she was a cheating liar. I took a quick selfie with the door so that I could prove to my friends that I had the guts to do something like this. I went straight to the airport and took the red-eye flight back to San Fran. I've never been so angry and upset in my life. The next morning, I took a taxi home and was shocked when I saw who was waiting for me inside my house. It was my girlfriend. She was sleeping on my sofa, and she looked so tired. It seemed like she was waiting there for me all night long. I woke her up, and she was so adorable, saying, "Surprise!" and gave me a big kiss. Thank God she knew the passcode for my front door lock, but I was so confused. How could she be here? If I'd just seen her in New York the night before, had she been on the same flight as me? It didn't make sense. I decided not to say anything because I was way too embarrassed. What if it hadn't been her? Instead, we made a breakfast and snuggled up on the sofa to watch some movies. But around lunchtime, she got a call. It was from her brother, and he said someone had vandalized the door of her house and spray painted obscene stuff all over it. My girlfriend was so angry when she hung up the phone. She said if she ever found out who this crazy person was that would do such a thing, she'd punch him right in the face. I gave her a hug and said I'm sure it couldn't be that bad and tried to comfort her. All the while I was shaking inside. What if she found out it was me who'd done it? We got hungry and my girlfriend took my phone to order some food. And then her face changed. She looked at me in shock. "Jethro!" she screamed. Oh no, I thought. She'd found the photo. Then I explained what had happened, and she was just so touched that I'd fly all the way to surprise her. Instead of getting angry at me, she started laughing. All we could do was laugh because we'd both come up with exactly the same surprise. I'd offer to buy her a new door for Valentine's Day. Can't get more romantic than that, right? Long-distance relationships are not easy at all. But now I learned how to build trust and make our love stronger and happier, regardless of the distance. Let me know if you're in a long-distance relationship too, and if you have any tips on how to trust your partner more.
Hey, I'm Damien. I'm 15 and my big brother Saul is in prison, and it's all my fault. My parents aren't the best. It's been the same thing my whole life. My mom and dad argue a lot. She accuses him of cheating, he gets angry then leaves, then they make up and he comes back. This has carried on for years. Sometimes they split up for a week. Other times a few months, but my mom always takes him back. Then they argue again. Growing up in this environment has been hard, but when it comes to my parents, I feel invisible. They don't care about me, they only care about themselves. It was Saul who helped me with my homework so that I managed to get a B in math. He gave me girl advice so I finally had the guts to ask Shelley Pearson out on a date, and took me out for a burger when my parents were too busy arguing to cook us dinner. Without Saul, everything would have totally sucked. But then Saul got a girlfriend, and he stopped hanging out at home as much. He was always at his girlfriend's house, and I was left alone with my warring parents. All of the constant arguing became too much. Then Dad left, and all Mom did was cry. She refused to leave the house, so I had to buy groceries for her. I was so angry with Mom and Dad for being so selfish, and I was even madder at Saul for choosing his girlfriend over me. I didn't care any more about anything. I was angry at the world, and nothing seemed to matter. So, to make myself feel better, I started to rebel. It began with me stealing potato chips and chocolate from the local shop. I only did it because I was hungry, and when I mentioned how hungry I was to Mom, she just swore at me, then locked herself in her room. Stealing gave me a buzz that I couldn't explain. I guess I felt that my parents didn't care and neither did Saul, so stuff it. I could do what I wanted and no one was there to stop me. Over time, I did it to fund my addiction. The value of the stolen items didn't matter as much as the thrill of taking something and potentially getting away with it. I became more and more reliant on it, as it filled a void in my messed up life. Saul continued to hang out with his girl, all the picnic days, all the parties, and I was left feeling sad and alone. His eyes on her told me that I was not his priority anymore, and that left me devastated. Regardless of how many things I stole, it was never enough. I felt invisible and unimportant in the scheme of my own world, and I needed to remind people that I mattered. That when shoplifting no longer satisfied me anymore, I planned something bigger. As a little kid, I watched loads of videos on driving tips and how to start cars without keys. I found it all really interesting, and I couldn't wait until I could actually try it. It must be so exciting. I knew what I was doing could have landed me in big trouble, but at this point, I honestly believed that I didn't care. I suppose that there was a part of me that wanted to be caught, so that my parents would have no choice but to notice me. One night I stole a car, then abandoned it a mile from where I lived. I also set fire to it. I was walking home when Saul and his stupid girlfriend pulled up alongside me in her car. He wound down the window and started telling me off for stealing the car. I don't know how he found out, but he knew, and he wouldn't shut up about it. This angered me. How dare he tell me off when he was barely around anymore? He told me to get in the car, but I refused to. You abandoned me for her, I scowled over at his girlfriend. You can't tell me what to do anymore. The next thing I remember is police sirens. Saul screamed at me to hide, so I jumped behind a hedgerow. He got out of his girlfriend's car and began to run. The police arrested him, and he confessed to stealing the car and setting fire to it. He had been in trouble with the law when he was younger, so I knew he'd be in serious trouble for this. He got 1 year in prison for something he didn't even do. His girlfriend finished with him, our parents are ashamed of him, and says he's never allowed home, and I'm so full of guilt that I feel sick all the time. Saul told me to be quiet, as he didn't want me ruining my life. Then he banned me from visiting him in jail. I stopped stealing, but it's all too late. My brother's in jail, and I've ruined his life. I hate myself, and I have no one to talk to. Worse still, my mom took Dad back, and because they think Saul's a criminal, they now argue even more than normal. I just want my big brother back home. I miss him so much. I know what I did was wrong and I shouldn't have done it. I never meant for Saul to get the blame. I just wanted to feel something, to feel anything. But if I come forward now, I'll end up in trouble, and so will Saul, because they could charge him with perverting the course of justice. It's all such a mess and it's all my fault. I should have asked for help. Instead, I turned to crime. I hate myself for what I did and I miss my brother so much. Thanks for listening to my story, guys. Please tell me what I should do. Should I admit it was me and land myself in trouble? Or do I follow my brother's wishes and carry on lying?
Hey, my name's Amanda, and this is the story about my younger boyfriend, who despite being a really big, tall guy, was younger than me. We met when I was 18, and I thought he was really cute. But because he was only a freshman, but already playing on the varsity football team, I thought he had transferred from another school out of state, like Michigan or something like that. I walked up to him one day and said, "Hey, I'm Amanda. I think you're in my English class." It's always a good idea to say something that you know is wrong when you're talking to a cute guy, because then he has to correct you and you're like, "Oh, really?" And you can twirl your hair or something like that. So anyway, he said, "I don't think so." And I was like, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah, I'm new to this school and everything." So I was like, "Where did you transfer from?" But instead of saying Michigan or something like that, he said Jefferson. I couldn't think where Jefferson was, and then after a minute, I realized Jefferson wasn't a place. It was a school. And a middle school at that. Oh my God, this guy wasn't a senior. He was a freshman. Like 3 months ago, he was in 8th grade. So I was like, oh, my mistake. And then I told him I would see him around or something like that. I felt so stupid when I went back to my friends, but they hadn't been paying attention because they were holding the mirror for each other doing their makeup. So anyway, then I went to college and got a job at a coffee shop, and one day this really big, tall guy walked in and ordered a fancy drink. I was about to ask if he needed a room for cream or anything when I looked up and I was like, holy crap, this is the guy who I thought was a senior at my school like 2 years ago. I blushed really hard, but blamed it on the coffee machine because it was really hot. He seemed to recognize me and asked if I was the girl who thought we were in the same English class. I started to deny it, but then he said he hoped I was because he thought I was really cute. Then he said the only reason he didn't talk to me after that was because he figured I wouldn't be interested in a younger guy. He left with his coffee and I thought, okay, that's a bummer, because he's kind of cute and really tall. So he looked like he's 20 anyway. When I walked to my car after work, he was waiting for me. I blushed again, and he was like, I knew it. Knew what? I said. That you'd like me. It wasn't just the coffee machine. So he asked if I wanted to go get some coffee, which was kind of funny because I work at a coffee place and everything. But it wasn't really about the coffee. So after that night, we got coffee pretty much every day, and before too long, we were dating. He was really sweet and didn't mind me teasing him. Because he was big, he had to buy his clothes at a special shop, and sometimes all they had were Hawaiian shirts. I told him it made him look like he was always on vacation. But he said he didn't mind because it meant he would be on vacation with me, and he liked that. When we watched movies at my place, I always laughed at him when he didn't know about things because he was too young. Sometimes we wouldn't make it to the end of the movie because we started kissing, and that was better than any chase scene or a scene where someone got shot or something. And eventually, he stopped going home after the movie and stayed at my place with me. And even though I was ready to, keep going, he would just stop kissing me and lie back on the pillow and hug me instead. At first, it was really sweet, But as time went on, I wondered whether anything else was ever going to happen. So I started trying different things to get him to do more. The first night, I wore a little nightgown that I thought he would like because it had footballs all over it. But he just wrapped his arms around me and turned the light out. I was like, what else can I try? I tried all the normal things a guy does when he likes a girl, like buy flowers or candy or cards or balloons, but nothing worked. You know, it's an uneasy feeling when you're hugging your boyfriend and you're not even doing anything. So one night I was lying awake with him hugging me and I had an idea. Aha! The next day I tried my idea out. Right when we started falling asleep, I pulled out a gigantic teddy bear I won at the fair when I was 12 and put it in his arms where I normally slept. When he didn't wake up, I realized he wasn't just hugging me to make me feel better. He needed something to hug to sleep because it made him feel better. It wasn't about him liking me enough after all. From then on, if I had to study or something, he used the big teddy bear to go to sleep. And we were both really happy. I still wore the nightgown with the footballs on it because that also made him really happy. And I'm willing to be patient until he's ready.
Hi, I'm Bertha, and this is a story about what my sister did when she found out our dad was having an affair. You see, our dad cheated on our mom and left us to go live with that homewrecker. For some reason, Mom coped pretty well with it. She's a strong woman. But me and my little sister were devastated. It felt like our lives had been torn apart. Mom was obviously struggling too, but she put on a brave face for our sake and encouraged us to be civil with Dad and his new woman so that we didn't lose him forever. But I wanted absolutely nothing to do with my dad and that horrid woman, and my sister felt the same. Except she took it more seriously than I did, and she started to change. She went from being this sweet, respectful kid to a kid on a mission. One day she said, "They're both going to regret this. You mark my words." I was shocked. My sister had idolized our dad in the past, but now all she wanted to do was hurt him, the way he'd hurt us. During this time, I decided to enroll in college in another town across the country. I wanted to get as far away as possible from this toxic situation. After my first year at college, I went home for the summer vacation, and lo and behold, you'll never guess what was happening. My dad and the homewrecker were engaged to be married and wanted us to be part of their special day. I wasn't having any of it, but my sister was weirdly enthusiastic about it all. She kept saying we should participate because it would make Dad happy before his world came crashing down. What did she mean? Well, before we knew it, the big day had arrived, and it was now or never. I had to grin and bear it and watch my dad officially wreck his life even more. But I'll be honest, I was pleasantly surprised. The ceremony was actually quite nice, and so was the reception. My dad's a successful businessman, so he obviously dropped a lot of cash dollar on the day. There must have been more than 500 guests there. He still hadn't even come over to say hello to us, so why did he even need us there? It felt like we were just there so people wouldn't gossip and say, "Oh, where's his daughters?" My sister was acting particularly strange. She kept looking at me and grinning, so I decided to relax a bit. Maybe I was overthinking things. I should just enjoy the day. During the reception, they showed a video of my dad and his new wife. I won't lie, it was pretty romantic, even though I hated the homewrecker's guts. It showed all their sweet little conversations and them skipping down the beach hand in hand. Everyone loved the video, and I even saw some people shedding a few tears. The longer the video was on, the more my sister kept grinning. She was shifting in her seat and kept looking at me to make sure I was watching. "What's going on?" I asked her. But before she could reply, the video cut and a new video flashed up on the screen. It was quite fuzzy at first, and everyone in the room was murmuring. I saw a look of panic shoot across my dad's new wife's face, and then it became clear why. The video was of her and two other men. They were in some dimly lit room together, and then it changed again, and it was one of the men from the video accusing my dad's wife of being a whore and that he hoped she was enjoying her wedding day. Then he laughed and said hi to my dad and said, "Enjoy your promiscuous wife." The room was so deadly quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. All eyes were on the bride, and my dad looked like he was about to explode. He quickly got up and left, and his bride ran after him in tears. I looked at my sister, my jaw wide open in shock, and she just winked at me and covered her mouth to hold back the laughter. The rest of the reception was canceled, and it was so humiliating. Everyone was disgusted, and the whole room was in uproar. I grabbed my sister and asked her to follow me out into the garden. Then she confessed everything. Turned out my sister had been keeping a rather close eye on our dad's wife-to-be and had uncovered some shocking stuff. She'd been stalking her for months and had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what she'd found out. How ironic. The homewrecker truly was a homewrecker. What a great nickname for her. She'd been sleeping with at least 2 other guys and was known to dabble in the occasional threesome. My sister said she'd waited for the wedding to do this because she'd still felt so mad at our dad for hurting Mom. I wish I could say I felt sorry for my dad, but he had this coming. If he hadn't cheated on Mom in the first place, this never would have happened. It's crazy though, because they'd already signed the marriage certificate just 1 hour before the video played. So now Dad is waiting to get another divorce. Well, it's for the best. He seriously dodged a bullet there. I admired my sister for doing it. I never would have had the guts to do something like that. I hope we never see that homewrecker again. Do you think my sister did the right thing? Or should she have told my dad before? Let me know what you think in the comment section. Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm 16 and I've always struggled with feeling like I'm not good enough. My mom didn't want me, so my great-grandma brought me up. I love my great-grandma and I'm grateful for everything she's done for me, but I can't help but feel like a burden. Instead of enjoying her retirement, she was taking me to school and struggling to find the money to pay for my school trips. The one thing I've always felt like I had going for me is my looks. I'm pretty and I have a naturally curvy figure. I know that the boys notice me and sometimes I like this. It makes me feel like I'm worth something, even if they only like me for the way I look and not actually for me. Men haven't always treated me very well. I've put my trust in the wrong people, and it's led me to being abused. All I've ever truly wanted is for someone to see my worth, but I just feel like they've taken advantage of me and used me. I met my boyfriend Jay online. He lives in Philadelphia, and I live in DC, so I knew the distance wasn't ideal, but I really liked him. I have cousins in Delaware, so whenever I visited them, he would drive and see me. At first, he was so sweet and caring, and he listened to me. Like, really listened. I felt like I could talk to him about anything, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was worth something. When he asked me to be his girlfriend, I immediately said yes. The problem was that the sweet guy I was talking to online soon changed into someone who could be aggressive and thoughtless. I didn't like this version of Jay, but I was afraid of losing him. When he asked me to send him nude pictures, I sent him some, even though I didn't want to, as I didn't want him to be mad at me. One time, he asked me to send him nudes, but I was out with my friends. I told him I was busy, and he sent me a horrible message telling me if I didn't send him a nude pic right that instant, he would post the pictures I'd previously sent him online for everyone to see. I was so afraid that he'd follow through with his threat that I rushed to the restroom so I could send him a picture. As soon as I sent it, he went back to the nice version of himself and told me I looked sexy. A week later, a girl messaged me on social media and told me that she had spent the night with Jay. At first, I accused her of lying, but then she sent me a screenshot of the messages he'd sent her where he'd thanked her for an amazing night. My heart instantly sank. I loved Jay and didn't understand how he could hurt me like this. I rang him up and confronted him about it. At first, he denied it and was mad with me. But then he confessed that he cheated on me more than once with multiple girls. He said that I was hot, but that's all I was good for. I was devastated, but I didn't want to break up with him as I didn't want to lose him. When his best friend Rayshawn sent me flirty messages, I replied. He ended up taking me out on a date. He drove from Philadelphia to see me. I know that it was wrong of me to date Jay's best friend when I was still his girlfriend, but I was hurting and I wanted him to hurt too. Jay found out, but he didn't seem that bothered. He just demanded more nudes as an apology. I stayed with Jay and his controlling behavior for a whole year. By this point, my confidence was very low and I felt worthless. I was too afraid to leave Jay as he'd convinced me that I didn't deserve any better. It was only when my friend Donna came around and saw me in an emotional mess because Jay was demanding nudes and I didn't want to take any that I realized I couldn't carry on like this. With Donna's support, I finally found the courage to end things with Jay. He added a bunch of people, including some of his friends and my friends, to a group chat. Then he told everyone my deepest secret, that when I was younger, I was abused. This was very hurtful, as I told him this in confidence, but he didn't stop there. He told the group that I deserved to be abused, as it was my fault men wanted me, as I'd been the one to seduce them. He finished by saying that he only wanted me for my body, nothing more, and called me horrible names. I was knocked out by all his cruel lies and dirty words. My friends instantly left the group, but it was too late as they now knew my secret. I was left feeling humiliated, betrayed, and alone. I felt so worthless that I didn't want to be alive anymore. I could barely bring myself to leave the house. I knew I was pretty on the outside, but on the inside I felt ugly, and it was all because of Jay. In the end, I just sat there in my pajamas and cried for most of the day. Donna came round and dragged me to the doctors. They put me on medication, and it's helping. I started to leave the house again, and I went back to school. I was feeling a lot more positive on everything, but then Jay messaged me. He was really sweet and apologized for everything bad he'd said and done. At first, I tried to ignore him, but his words sucked me in. We're now back together, and he hasn't asked me for any more nude pics. I'm living in fear that the mean Jay will reappear and undo all of my hard work to feel better. A part of me still loves Jay, but I also don't want it to be like it was last time. I deserve to be treated better than that. I really need your advice, as I'm so confused and I don't know what to do. Should I stay with Jay and hope that he really has changed and it'll be different this time? Or do I end it with him and face my fears of being alone?